Alright, time for another DraftScience.com. No, DraftPhysics.com. DebatePhysics.com. Um, Video presentation. Yeah. Draft Science just on YouTube. Anyway, wasted time. I just hate wasted time. But it's the internet, and communication on the internet is tedious and difficult. So I'm just going to go over this again, just because I have to, because nobody's going to provide any counter theoretical point or argument or statement or anything explaining how anything I'm going to say is wrong, incorrect, not plausible, blah blah blah. So clearly there's the argument between 1/2 mv squared, which this part is what Leibniz added a year before Newton basically said mv. Okay, and that's what gravity is. Okay, is momentum. It's a kind of momentum. It gives things momentum. It's a force. Okay, and clearly said 9.8. It's a force that happens. You get 9.8 meters, okay, of velocity. That is, your velocity is 9.8 meters per second, and it's per 1 second, okay? And it's clear that's what Newton was saying. And if you're going to change this fraction, that is, if you're going to make this a 2 or a 4 or a 7, if you're going to make this something you can square, then you have to change the number up here. Okay, so if you make it a 2, you have to make this 19.6. If you're going to make it a 0.5, then you're going to have to make this 4.9. You have to change the number. There is no such thing as 9.8 meters per second squared. There's no such thing. It doesn't... seconds. There's no such thing. It's a nonsense. Okay, because this is 9.8 meters per 1 second. And if you're going to multiply it times the number of seconds, that would be a separate multiplication. Now, you want to square some other thing, that's okay, but you can't square the ratio. No. There's no per second per second. Okay, and so it's illustrated by the fact that in a unit of time, all right, you fall a certain amount and you gain a certain amount of this 9.8 meters. So if this was 1 second, this was 1 second, this falling distance, and everything falls at the same rate, everything collects a different amount of force, but everything falls at the same rate. Different matter, okay, big heavy things collect lots of force, that's why they land and go boom, and light things collect a little bit of force, and that's why they don't go boom. Alright, so this is the same time, the same 9.8. Okay. And the difference is this, okay, is also the same time. Yes, it's more space, it's more distance, but it's the same time. I guess I need one more in there. 1, 2, 3, yes. Okay, so in this whole distance, you're still only going to be in it the same amount of time, and you're only going to get 9.8, and we already know that you will be going a velocity of 19.6 when you land. So even though you went 4 times the distance, you're only going twice the velocity, and you only use twice the time, and you're only going to compress, say, a spring twice as much. So you'll only have twice the weight. That's what happens. That's the facts. Those are what all the evidence indicates. Okay, so clearly, all right, as pointed out, if I had a gravitational body and I set up a distance to travel across it, and we had a little contest, and we just, threw something at different velocities across this distance, the fact is, okay, the faster I throw it, the less this way velocity I'm going to get. And the slower I throw it, the more this way velocity I'm going to get. The thing is going to have a component of velocity in this direction, and it's going to have its original velocity in this direction. That's the way gravity works. They're separate velocities. And you're going to gain a certain amount of velocity in this direction, and the amount you gain is completely dependent on how quickly you go through the force. Okay, the force is just hitting, and it's completely dependent about, just like photons from the sun, it just depends on how many hit you, how sunburned you get. And if you go through the sun, the exposure quickly, you get very few bending tons, and you do it very slowly, you get hit by a lot of them. And that's basically the proof that Newton was correct, that this is correct, that this is the right answer, and this is not anything at all. It's a fantasy, it's a fable, it's a story they tell, but it doesn't have anything to do with the reality of what the force does. You can't collect 4 times the force in only twice the time. That does not equal. Twice the time does not equal 4 units of force. Context. So, comments. So, idiot, John Maddock. Obviously, NASA calculations work. That's not the question. The question isn't whether they successfully landed on the moon, retard. The question is, what formula did they use to land on the moon? Now, if I could prove to you that the formula they used was MV, that is, they didn't use Leibniz mechanics with the square term, they didn't use kinetic energy, they just did equations based on thrust was basically just matter moving a velocity, mass and velocity, and that's all it was, and that's what they used to navigate the little lunar module to the surface of the moon. Now, if I prove that to you, will you acknowledge? What's I mean, you never heard that NASA says we only use Newtonian mechanics? Yeah, they're sort of famous for saying that. Anyway, work because they sent astronauts to the moon and back. Yes, I witnessed it on TV live. Okay, I was there, so to speak. Yeah. If their calculations were wrong, the moon landings would not have been successful. So again, the argument isn't that their calculations were wrong. It's that their calculations were not Leibnizians. They were not using Leibnizian theory. They were not using Leibnizian mechanics. They were overtly, as stated, using Newtonian mechanics. So you can't even come close to being on the subject. You're just a stupid moron who types tripe on the internet. I mean, it's just, it's really, you're so far away from the actual argument being made. Ugh, it's disgusting. Stupid fuck. Remove. Alright, so a technological who just wants to argue. Yeah. I mean, it's just useless mush. I explained in every way why I find you not my kind of guy, okay? You're just mushy. You're just a wishy-washy, okay? I don't like wishy-washies. Alright, and that's all you are. You're some kind of fence-sitting, blah, 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 chill kind of guy with your little sunglasses and all. Okay, fuck you. We're not going to get along. Alright, I'm a direct, get to the point kind of person. You're a, well, let's think about it for a few million years. Fuck that. In my comment on Michael's video, I said I would do the math on my own leisure. Yes, but you said you were perfectly satisfied that, yes, everything did seem so perfect, so reasonable. Why not? Bullshit. Also explained what I had come to understand up to that point was that, yeah, everything's just fine, thank you very much. Based on my initial viewing, thanks to him. And again, thanks to him. So I spent a good deal of time explaining why he is wrong. Alright, but I'm not going to get any thanks. Anyway, what makes you think I go on offensive? I didn't ask you to go on an offensive. I just asked you to say, that really doesn't account for it. You can't talk about changing 1/1,000,000th of the mass of the spaceship and say that means that now you can go 3 times faster, because you've changed your weight by 1/1,000,000th of a percent. Changing your weight by 1/1,000,000% can't possibly account for a 3 times change in your velocity. Especially I had sought his help, ? I don't think that's what you did. What you did was you pointed out how it doesn't make sense to you, okay, and you asked him to make it make sense. Anyway, I'm not you. Yes, thankfully for both of us, I think. Sorry for commensurating while I was frustrated. The point isn't your frustration. The point is that you're really not going to, how much evidence do I have to throw in front of you for you to weigh? And so I did make this point again to you specifically and said, isn't this a starting point where you can say, look, I know something's wrong? Because it's just wrong that they're saying Newton agrees with mv squared, that Newton invented it, that Newton had something to do with it, that Newton's mechanics leads to it. That's just wrong, okay? It's not historically accurate. It's not the truth. They're fundamentally different accusations about reality. Leibniz didn't believe both theories are right. So both theories have a role to play. This isn't an argument about semantics. It's a direct black and white argument about two different, entirely different understandings of what motion means in the universe. Anyway, and you can't even concede that first they have no frickin' evidence, and second, they're lying about what Newton said. Alright, what makes you think I'd go on the offensive, especially, okay, I'm not you. Sorry for blah blah blah, and trying out your language somewhat. So what the fuck is this? This isn't about language. So again, you think that kind of crap is going to be at all interesting to me. You're going to make some language accusation that I'm speaking some different language. No, the words are the same. Momentum versus kinetic energy, which they have perverted the language. I didn't invent some notion where I'm going to call this motion in the universe and then I'm going to call this motion in the universe and say both things are motion in the universe. As I only annoyed you and you ended up viewing it as underhanded. I didn't say it was underhanded. Okay, so that's wrong. I find it wishy-washy and mushy and silly and useless. There's no still point in it in having the two different conversations. You should have the same conversation on both comment boards. You shouldn't have different conversations. One conversation shouldn't be, oh yes, I think you're right. And then you go over to the completely opposing side and say, well, yeah, I still think you have a point. No. You also said I have a small brain and that I speak out of both sides of my mouth. Yeah, I might have said that. Yeah, sorry. But yeah, that's how it sounds to me. That's my honest impression. Chill. I mean, that's how you seem to me, okay? You seem kind of dim, okay, that you can't get to the core of this either. I mean, how many of these irregularities in their theory do I have to point out? I mean, how many times do I have to point out, well, I take one mass and put it on a scale, and it weighs 10 pounds. And then I take a second mass and do exactly the same amount of work and put it on the scale, and now it weighs 20 pounds, and now they say I did 4 times the work. I only did 2 units of work, but I have 4 times the energy. Whatever. Yeah, okay, whatever. I downloaded the textbook I mentioned. Right. No, you downloaded. That's right. Because I wanted to see, if some overt thing was there. Okay, I wanted to see what the book was. Okay, I know what it had, a dedication to God. So the first page of the book is a lovely dedication to how wonderful God is. So right there you're saying, why am I reading this book anyway? It's a science book dedicated to God. Fuck that. Okay. And I am sure you know most PF readers have a search button. Yes, so I'm supposed to go through the book and through every reference to kinetic energy to find the one that might have something to do with thrusters or something? No, I'm not going to waste my time with that. That's not my job. The simple point is you referenced a book and you didn't cite a quote from it, you didn't cite a page from it, you didn't do any of that. You just said, go read the whole book. Thanks. All right. So you could have looked up kinetic yourself. And what will I find is the point. Why do I have to even do the looking up? Why couldn't you just explain the reference in the book that convinces you it's meaningful, that has something to do with the subject? No, you didn't do that. Okay, you just made a vague reference to, oh, well, there's proof in this book that kinetic energy is a real thing and they use the formulas in these real ways. Well, you didn't show any of it, you didn't demonstrate any of it, and again, I was just curious what this book was. And what it is a book dedicated to God. I was just trying to put my thumb in the air in regards to your claim that KE gets abandoned when it comes to anything remotely practical. Well, that's not exactly what I said, but I certainly said it certainly has to be abandoned when it comes to thrust in space. So if you're going to move something in space, you're not going to use the kinetic energy formula because it's not going to work. It's not going to tell you the true capacity of something to move something. So look, this is an experiment also that exists on the internet. Toady did it. He just took a simple Newton's cradle, half mass here, double mass here, full mass, and crashed them into each other. This one going from 4 times the height to equal the same momentum. They hit, okay, one of them has twice the kinetic energy of the other one, and when they hit, which one rules? Which one decides what happens? Momentum. The thing with more kinetic energy doesn't push, doesn't move the crash in its direction. No, it just bounces just like momentum should. So it's just another piece of evidence that kinetic energy isn't real, okay? It fails the practical test. All right? Are you arguing against those arguments somewhere? Are you pointing out how, no, that's not the way it happens, and here's the explanation for that? Are you pointing me to the explanation? You're pointing me to the explanation for how 4 times the distance is 4 units of gravitational energy? Did somebody make a counter argument to anything I drew on this board? For you? The stuff I drew for you? No. Alright. Remotely practical. I don't understand exactly what the math is doing. Per second. That's what it's doing. It's doing a nonsense. They just invent some notion that acceleration is automatically repeated, okay, for a squared amount of time. It doesn't make any sense. Of course, it can't make any sense. It's a nonsense. All right. But a text on astrophysics has got to provide some sort of window into what NASA does. Says you. Okay, a text devoted to God on physics. And again, you can't even cite the reference where they're talking about thrust and applying the kinetic energy formula and saying that it's the kinetic energy of the little particles that decides how much the spaceship moves. When the Newton's cradle sort of proves, no, momentum decides what moves. Oh, God damn it. Over the weekend, my understanding improved a lot. So I played around with the numbers involving your falling weight scenario. Oh, here we go. Good. And I really don't see how the object strikes the ground with anything other than 4x the force. So amazing. Amazing. So 9.8 meters per 1 second, you drop it for 2 seconds, and it has 4 times the force. So I go through the gravity for 2 seconds over here, and I get 4 times the force. Amazing stupidity. God damn. So we already knew what side you were on. See, so you're just... See, as much as I thought you were just a wishy-washy, you're really just a shill, okay? So it's really just that you really do have a huge bias, and now you're just going to, in these 2 sentences, you're going to say you somehow disproved this argument, when you're not going to give any indication how you made even a dent in it, or even a slight anything in it. You're just saying, twice the time, 4 times the energy. Twice the velocity, 4 times the energy. Yeah, it says so. We all say so. Oh, fuck. Alright, I really don't see how the object strikes the ground with anything other than 4x the force after falling twice as long. So just as a sentence, how could you, Don't you understand how 1 plus 1 equals 4? Don't you understand? I mean, it's so obvious. 1 plus 1 equals 4. I mean, shit, who can't understand that? That's what you're doing in front of my face. Right here to my face. You're saying 1 plus 1 equals 4. Okay. But I don't think I can easily show. Yeah, I don't think you can do anything. That's right. I don't think you can do anything reasonable or rational to explain how 1 plus 1 equals 4. 1 weight, 2 weights, 4 weights. Okay, maybe I'll record it at some point and then you can explain what you think I'm doing wrong. 1 plus 1 can't equal 4. Duh. I have to explain that to you? It's just so hard. Yeah. All right, well, yeah, here's this other comment. I guess we can delete this one, frankly. It's run its course, so to speak. All right. So, did somebody respond to him? Let's see. Falsify. Okay, well, yeah, I read all that crap. All right. So we'll move on to the comments on Michael's video, which ought to be somewhat entertaining. Do I have to go through the nasty commercials? Anyway, so my comment looks like the last one, my response video. All right, so posted whatever, something or other. How do you explain to anybody the reciprocal of the inverse square law? I don't know what the reciprocal of the inverse square law is. You can just understand that a light bulb is doing the opposite of gravity. Okay, that is pushing things away at the inverse squared rate, and that gravity pushes things in at the inverse square rate. So if the sun is, the light coming off the sun is the reciprocal of the gravity that the sun creates. One of them is the exact opposite mechanism. Okay, example of this are doubling the rotational velocity would quadruple the centrifugal force. So again, no. Says you. Yeah, there's no argument made that that's true. Doubling the voltage of an electric circuit quadruples the power. So who says so? Twice the voltage is often just twice the speed. You want to increase the speed of something, motor or something, twice the voltage, twice the speed. So I don't. These are just statements. These aren't proofs of anything. All right. So Moron Gosling says, "Thank you for this well-explained talk." So again, it doesn't explain anything. Per second is an explanation. Acceleration is, 9.8 meters per second. Newton says so. So that's not a well-explained talk. Well-explained would be to state that Leibniz had this opposing theory, and everybody rejected it until 20 years after Newton and Leibniz were dead. It was dug up and resurrected with little silly clay experiments. Even though I could understand, glad you've had enough time to design the cheat to your upcoming lever experiment. So again, it will be in that vein. He's spent over 2 weeks now, more than 2 weeks, trying to form this experiment, okay, trying to shape it. Okay, looking forward to that. All right, so this is Falwell, the moron. Hi there, Ian. Hope you are well, mate. I agree, this was a great video. And it was just talking points. There was nothing in the video. He didn't even explain certain things very well. He didn't explain that when you throw something in a gravitational field, there's now two forces. There's the force of your momentum and going one way, one vector, and then there's the force of gravity going down, pushing you down. Wasn't well explained at all. Thank you, Michael. So they're all rubbing hiney. I'm looking forward to the upcoming lever test that's obviously going to be cheated, LOL. So again, so they all know that this is a real thing, okay? We already know that Gosling has had to make at least 4 videos retracting his bold statements. Right? Prove it. I proved. Wait. Well, okay, I didn't prove. Okay, whoops. Whoops. This is their real track record. I've recently uploaded another KE proof that you may enjoy, Ian. Yes, another proof where we don't see how high he dropped things from. Nothing. Okay, so it's all in isolation. Let's just show in isolation our proof. Let's not show the real experiment. Disgusting bullshit. Nice summary of the basic physics that some still struggle with. Yeah, 1 + 1 = 4. Yeah, nobody should struggle with that. That makes perfectly good sense. So then he's going to argue some minutia, so I won't even bother reading that. Look at all this bullshit. So this is all about their silly idea that this is somehow about, there's this tiny event that takes place. Something happens over, this much time or space. And they're going to argue about what's taking place in this tiny millimeter of time right here. And it doesn't mean anything. It's a net product. So you know that whatever happens in there has an end result. You go 10 miles an hour faster, you go 10 miles an hour slower. So that's all that happens. There's nothing interesting really happening in that millionth of a second. So he says, I agree with those points, including I should have used isolated system instead of closed system. I don't know what the difference is, frankly. It really, it's pretty hard to understand. Let's see, isolated and closed. What would be the difference? For the conversion of energy discussion. For the average versus instantaneous qualities, right? Again, it's not about, it's net. It's the product of an event. The product is all that's going to matter. I also agree, but I wanted to focus on this video on when are each these things applied or something. Methods most useful. Again, most useful. Kinematics, just describing the motion, Newton's laws. So again, more lies about what Newton said. Relating forces to acceleration at specific instant, conservation of energy, how systems. So he's just doing a rephrase, the same conceptual words. There's all kinds of different kinds of energy, and they're all made of different kinds of stuff, and blah blah blah. And it's all mush. It's only one kind of energy. It's just motion of a mass. That's it. Even their KE formula has mv right in the middle of it, and they're still talking as if there's something else going on in the universe besides masses moving. Each of these topics has a lot more fine details and it deserves entire video series. Well, I'll be there to do this. Yeah. Okay, and so then the guy who says his name in the comments for no good reason. Anyway. Alright, so that's all there was there. So we'll go see if there's anything else to report on and then call it a video. Alright, so this is the debatephysics.com page, and there's 11 videos here. Now the first one is not the best. Okay, 5-minute video, but I mean it's one that really has to come with measurements. So somebody has to have the experiment where they do really good measurements of how high the balls bounce. So without that information you really can't prove, okay, that kinetic energy is being converted in a free manner. Okay, I'll still assert it is, but I can't prove it unless I have a really good video. Anyway, and then the rest of them are the arguments I just made about gravity, how gravity works. Okay, 9.8 meters per every second. So why don't you, technologic guy, right? If you're a sincere player, why don't you just say, look, I mean, DraftScience makes a point about the origins of 9.8 meters per 1 second, okay, as a ratio of how you collect gravity, and it makes a good point that it's a time-dependent force. Could you provide a counter-argument and explain how it's not a time-dependent force? That it's not about how long you're falling in the gravity, which decides how much energy you're going to collect from the gravity. That why don't you explain how 1 + 1, that is 2 units of time, equals 4 units of energy? You could say that. That would be helpful, okay? But your comments aren't in any way helpful, okay? They're not going to oblige the other side to provide counter arguments to all of these arguments. Okay, they're only 5-minute videos. Why don't you ask him to respond to a couple of these and explain how it does make sense, what they're doing? But no, you didn't do that. You said everything's fine, thanks. Okay. So anyway, so yes, lots of kinetic energy videos, but there are other subjects, the double slit, blah, blah, blah. Again, you know, there's really is decisive evidence that it's, you know, again, Newton wins, Huygens loses, you know, and, yeah, it's obviously corpuscles, you know, nothing, waves aren't the game. Anyway, blah, 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 blah. Been there, done that for years, and unfortunately still haven't gotten anything like a rational reply to these simple arguments. Dropping round things into clay. Let's have a real physicist explain to us how, yes, that's a very scientifically sensible way to detect how much energy something has, because it's very fair. It treats things going fast and things going slow, treats them exactly the same. You know, there'll be the same amount of contact with the clay and the same amount of pushing, and it'll be very linear and very fair. Again, the rolling object is in here. Okay, I roll a ball on a surface, it goes 4 times the distance. Wow, 4 times the distance, you know, twice the velocity. That looks impressive. But again, it only rolls twice as long. And it does this signature thing that just gives it away that the friction is being caused by gravity, and that it only goes half the speed when after it's gone 3/4 of the distance. It's exactly the same as gravity. It's just showing you again how it's just a lie. Yes, it looks like it's more work to go 4 times the distance, but the work was against a different amount of force. The counter force, the friction, was different for the thing moving fast than it was for the thing moving slow. I mean, these aren't complicated arguments. They deserve a reply. They haven't gotten any reply. Come on. If you want to be a fair player in the game, then ask them to answer these points. Or at least explain to me why these points don't mean anything to you. Why you watch these 5-minute videos and say, gee, that doesn't mean anything. Gee, that argument isn't an argument. Come on. You want me to consider you a fair player, then do that. Alright, anyway. So, till the next time and such and so forth and whatnot. Well, I think that's enough.